I am Audrey Thompson, a 28-year-old piano prodigy who stopped performing publicly after a traumatic experience years ago. My relationship with my mother and sister has always been complicated, defined by competition and conditional love. When the wedding invitation arrived, I never expected my mother would demand I play as mere background music at my own sister's wedding. It was meant to humiliate me, to prove I was a failure. But that day, when my fingers touched those keys, everything changed. If you are watching this right now, please like and subscribe and let me know in the comments where you are watching from. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. My earliest memories revolve around the piano. I was just 4 years old when my father noticed how I would mimic songs I heard on the radio. He bought a second-hand upright piano that barely fit in our modest living room, and my life was forever changed. By 7, I was winning local competitions. By 10, I was performing across the state. The piano was not just an instrument to me. It was my voice, my confidant, my escape. My mother, Elaine, recognized my talent immediately, not as something to nurture, but as something to harness. She had been a music teacher before I was born, with dreams of performing that never materialized. In me, she saw a second chance. Practices became rigid, timed affairs. 2 hours before school, 3 hours after. Weekends were consumed by lessons and competitions. My father, Richard, was different. A gentle music professor at the local community college, he taught me that music was about expression, not perfection. While mother stood over me, counting mistakes, father sat beside me, asking what I felt when I played. These contrasting approaches created a dissonance in my musical education that echoed throughout our family dynamics. My sister Brooke, 3 years older, lived in the periphery of my musical world. She had tried piano briefly, but showed no particular aptitude. Mother did not hide her disappointment. As my trophy shelf expanded, Brooke retreated into academics and social activities, areas where she could shine without comparison. But the damage was done. Every compliment I received at family gatherings was a slight to her. Every recital meant another evening where our parents focused entirely on me. The pivotal moment came when I was 12. I had been selected to perform at the prestigious Northwest Young Musicians Showcase. Preparation had been brutal. Mother had extended my practice sessions to 5 hours daily, hovering over me like a storm cloud, ready to burst with criticism at any wrong note. The night before the showcase, we argued. I wanted to play a contemporary piece I had arranged myself. She insisted on Chopin's Something Traditional to impress the judges. That night, as I walked onto the stage in my stiff blue dress, looking out at the audience of hundreds, something broke inside me. My fingers hovered over the keys, and for the first time in my life, I could not play. The silence stretched for what felt like eternity. I looked to the wings where my mother stood, her face a mask of fury and shame. I managed to start eventually, but the damage was done. I fumbled through the piece, each mistake compounding my anxiety, until I finally finished to scattered, sympathetic applause. The car ride home was silent until we pulled into our driveway. Mother turned to me and said words that would echo through the years. "You have embarrassed this family. You have wasted our sacrifices." That night transformed our family. Mother turned her attention to Brooke, suddenly interested in her academic achievements and social connections. I became the family disappointment, the investment that had failed to yield returns. Father tried to buffer this shift, spending extra time with me, encouraging me to play for joy again, but the magic felt tainted. Despite this, music remained my sanctuary. I continued playing, but in private. I developed my own style, blending classical training with modern influences. Father would listen outside my door, occasionally offering gentle suggestions, reminding me that true musicianship came from authenticity, not approval. When I was 16, our already fragile family balance shattered completely. Father died suddenly of a heart attack. He collapsed at the college where he taught, and by the time the ambulance arrived, he was gone. With him went my only ally, my musical mentor, and the one person who loved me unconditionally. The weeks after his funeral were a blur of grief and increasing isolation. Mother threw herself into community activities, accompanying Brooke to college tours and social events. I was left alone with my piano and memories. The few times Mother spoke to me, it was with a cold efficiency, as if I were a household task to be managed rather than a daughter grieving her father. Brooke, now preparing for college, seemed to revel in her new position as the favored child. She made little effort to hide her satisfaction when Mother praised her or when she was included in plans that I was not. Our already strained relationship deteriorated further. Once I overheard her telling a friend, "It is finally my turn. Do you know what it is like living with a prodigy? Everyone thinking she is so special while ignoring what I do?" The final straw came during my senior year of high school. Despite the family friction, I had continued to excel academically and musically, though I no longer performed publicly. I had applied to several music schools, including Juilliard, my dream since childhood. When the acceptance letter arrived, Mother opened it before I could. She placed it on the kitchen table and said flatly, "Your father would have been proud. I hope you have a plan to pay for this, because I will not waste money on another public failure." That night I decided to leave. I would find a way to attend Juilliard without her support. I would rebuild my relationship with music on my own terms. At 18, wounded but determined, I packed my belongings and bought a one-way bus ticket to New York, leaving behind a household that had long since stopped feeling like home. New York City overwhelmed me at first. The constant noise, the press of people, the dizzying pace. Juilliard itself was intimidating, filled with talented musicians from around the world, many with far more prestigious backgrounds than mine. But for the first time in years, I felt something akin to freedom. Here no one knew me as the girl who froze on stage or the disappointment daughter. Here I could define myself. My scholarship covered tuition but little else. I found a tiny apartment in Washington Heights with a roommate, Lily Garcia, a vivacious violinist from Texas. She became my first real friend in years. When I confided about my family situation, she did not offer pity but practical support. "Family can be toxic," she said simply. "You get to choose your path now." Those first months were a delicate balance between academic demands and financial survival. I worked evenings at a coffee shop near campus, picking up extra shifts whenever possible. Despite the exhaustion, I felt more alive than I had in years. I was making choices, facing consequences, all without my mother's critical voice dictating my worth. Musically, I struggled initially. Years of playing in isolation had given me a unique style, but had also created bad habits. My professors recognized my raw talent but pushed me to refine my technique. One professor in particular, Dr. Winston, saw beyond my technical flaws to the emotional depth in my playing. He suggested I consider composition alongside performance. "You have a voice, Audrey," he told me after class one day. "Not everyone does. Technique can be taught, but authentic expression is rare." With his encouragement, I began exploring composition, creating pieces that blended classical structures with contemporary elements. The process was healing, allowing me to channel my complicated emotions into something beautiful. The piano became a friend again rather than an instrument of judgment. Gradually, I began performing again, starting with small student showcases where the stakes felt manageable. The first time I played one of my own compositions for an audience, my hands trembled so badly I thought I would have to stop, but I pushed through and the applause afterward felt like a balm on old wounds. My confidence grew with each small success. By my second year, I was performing regularly at student events and even at a few small venues around the city. I formed a small ensemble with Lily and two other students, experimenting with genre-crossing music that felt both fresh and deeply personal. Throughout this period of growth, contact with my family remained minimal. Occasional stilted phone calls with Mother where she detailed Brooke's accomplishments while barely inquiring about mine. Holiday cards with generic messages. I had sent money for flowers on Father's birthday, only to discover from a neighbor that Mother had claimed they were from the family without mentioning my contribution. Brooke, meanwhile, had graduated with honors and secured a job at a prestigious marketing firm. She occasionally sent impersonal text messages, usually when she wanted to appear magnanimous to others. Just checking in, she would write, never actually asking how I was doing or responding meaningfully when I shared news. During my final year at Juilliard, the calls from Mother became more frequent, though no warmer. Brooke had met someone, a wealthy businessman named James Sullivan. The relationship progressed quickly, and Mother could barely contain her satisfaction. James came from the right kind of family, with connections that would elevate Brooke's status considerably. "He has taken her to Paris," Mother told me during one call, her voice dripping with pride. "His family has a property there. This is the kind of stability and success I always wanted for my daughters. At least one of you listened. I let the barbs slide, having learned that engagement only prolonged the pain. But each call left me drained, temporarily shaking the confidence I had worked so hard to build. The engagement announcement came via a glossy photo card in the mail. Brooke radiant in a designer dress, her arm linked through that of a handsome man with a confident smile. On the back, details of a summer wedding at the Bellwood Country Club, the most exclusive venue in my hometown. No personal note, not even a handwritten signature. I placed the announcement on my desk, unsure how to feel. Part of me wanted to celebrate my sister finding happiness. Another part remembered all the small cruelties, the coldness, the years of competition. I decided to send a simple congratulatory text, not expecting much in return. Brooke's reply surprised me. Thanks. It would mean a lot to James to meet my whole family. Hope you can come. Not exactly warm, but the most direct communication we had shared in years. I considered declining, protecting the peace I had built. But something about the mention of James, this outsider who seemingly wanted to know me, sparked a tiny hope that perhaps things could be different. Before I could respond, Mother called. Her voice was different than usual, with a forced pleasantness that immediately put me on guard. Audrey, darling, I assume you received the wedding invitation. Brooke is hoping you will attend, of course. I was thinking about it, I said cautiously. Excellent. Actually, we were hoping you might contribute to the celebration. You know, with your music. My stomach tightened. You want me to perform at the wedding? Not perform exactly. Just provide some nice background music during the reception. Nothing showy. Simple, elegant pieces that will not distract from the bride. You still play Do Not You. The dismissiveness in her tone was familiar, the implication clear. My music was not worthy of attention, merely suitable as background noise. I should be grateful for the opportunity to be included at all. I am not sure that is a good idea, I said. Mother's pleasant tone vanished instantly. This is your sister's special day, Audrey. After everything we have done for you, after all the money your father and I invested in your lessons, you cannot do this one thing for your family. For your sister, who has always supported your little hobby. The revisionist history was staggering. My father would have never reduced my music to a little hobby, and Brooke had done anything but support me. Yet the manipulation worked as it always had. Guilt and obligation twisted inside me. Your father would be so disappointed, she added, delivering the final blow. He always believed music should bring people together. Here is your chance to honor his memory. Invoking my father was unfair but effective. Despite everything, I still craved some connection to my family, some acknowledgement that I belonged. Perhaps this could be a step toward healing old wounds. Fine, I said finally. I will play at the reception. Wonderful Mother's voice brightened instantly. We will need you here 3 days before for the rehearsal. I will have Brooke's wedding planner contact you with the details. After hanging up, I sat at my piano, fingers hovering over the keys, wondering if I had just made a terrible mistake. The journey back to Somerset, Pennsylvania, felt surreal. As the landscape outside the train window transformed from urban sprawl to rolling countryside, anxiety knotted in my stomach. 6 years had passed since I had left home, each mile now, bringing me closer to the past I had worked so hard to escape. Lily had insisted on accompanying me, taking time off from her orchestra rehearsals to provide moral support. Consider me your emotional bodyguard, she said, squeezing my hand as we approached our destination. Just give me the signal if you need extraction. My childhood home looked exactly the same, yet somehow smaller. The red brick exterior, the neatly trimmed hedges, the white porch swing where Father and I used to sit while I told him about my day. Mother opened the door before we could knock, her critical gaze sweeping over me instantly. Your hair is different, she said, instead of hello, noting the shoulder-length cut that had replaced my once waist-long locks. Her own appearance was impeccable. As always, not a strand of her highlighted bob out of place, her outfit coordinated and pressed. This is my friend Lily, I said, ignoring the comment. Mother's smile tightened. I was not aware you were bringing a guest. The house is quite full with wedding preparations. Lily extended her hand with practiced charm. I can get a hotel room, Mrs. Thompson. I just wanted to support Audrey and see where she grew up. Nonsense, I interjected. We will share my old room. Mother's disapproval was clear, but she stepped aside to let us enter. The house smelled of fresh flowers and lemon polish, every surface gleaming in preparation for the upcoming festivities. Photos lined the entryway, and I paused, noticing something immediately. There were dozens of pictures of Brooke through the years, several new ones with her fiancé James, many of Mother at various community events, but not a single recent photo of me. The last image appeared to be from my high school graduation, tucked into the corner of a crowded shelf. Lily noticed too, giving my arm a supportive squeeze as we followed Mother to the kitchen, where Brooke sat with a young man I assumed was James, surrounded by wedding planning materials. "Look who finally arrived," Mother announced, her tone suggesting I was late, though we had arrived exactly when requested. Brooke stood her smile, not quite reaching her eyes. "Audrey, you look different." She embraced me briefly, the scent of expensive perfume enveloping me. She had always been pretty in a conventional way, but now she exuded a polished elegance that spoke of money and careful curation. "This is James," she said, gesturing to her fiancé, who stood and extended his hand with genuine warmth. "The mysterious musical sister," he said, smiling. "I have heard so much about you." Something in his tone suggested what he had heard might not align with the reality standing before him. I wondered what stories Brooke had shared. "Audrey teaches piano to children now," Mother interjected, before I could speak, fabricating a career I had never mentioned. "Nothing prestigious, but it keeps her connected to music in some small way." The dismissal stung, but I had anticipated such moments. "Actually, I just completed my master's at Juilliard," I corrected calmly. "I specialize in contemporary composition and performance." James looked impressed. "That is amazing. I love live music. Perhaps you will play something for us before the wedding." "Audrey will be quite busy with the reception preparations," Mother cut in smoothly. "We have a very specific playlist for the background music. No time for impromptu performances." The message was clear. My role was functional, not featured. I was not here to be appreciated, but to fulfill a duty to be useful without being noticed. The days leading up to the wedding unfolded with similar moments of subtle exclusion. I was not included in the family brunch with James's parents. My name was omitted from the wedding announcements in the local paper, which mentioned Mother and bride's family but specified no sister. When the photographer came for family portraits, I was not called until Lily pointed out my absence. "Oh, we are doing immediate family first," Mother explained, though the groupings had included distant cousins and James's family members. The wedding rehearsal at the country club solidified my position as an afterthought. The wedding planner, a brisk woman named Nicole, had set up the baby grand piano in the farthest corner of the reception hall, partially obscured by a large floral arrangement. "You will start playing as guests arrive for the reception," Nicole instructed, handing me a printed list of acceptable classical pieces, nothing too complex or attention-grabbing, Mrs. Thompson specifically requested subdued ambient music. I scanned the list, noting it contained only the most generic wedding standards pieces I could play in my sleep. No personal selections, nothing that would showcase actual skill. "The mother of the bride was very clear," Nicole added, lowering her voice. "The music should enhance the atmosphere without drawing focus from the couple." After the rehearsal, as family and wedding party members gathered for dinner at an upscale restaurant, I excused myself to use the restroom. Passing by a partially open door to a private lounge, I overheard my mother's voice, followed by Brooke's distinctive laugh. "I cannot believe she actually agreed to play," Brooke was saying. "Did you see her face when you called it background music?" "It is perfect," Mother replied. "Everyone who remembers her as the promising young pianist will see what she has become. Perhaps it will finally humble her." James's mother asked if she was professional, Brooke continued. I just smiled and said she teaches beginners now. The mighty prodigy reduced to playing Here Comes the Bride while people eat canapés. Their laughter burned in my ears as I hurried past, heart-pounding. The cruelty was not surprising, but hearing it stated so plainly confirmed what I had suspected. This invitation was never about inclusion or family reconciliation. It was about public humiliation, about proving my failure to everyone who had once witnessed my success. I found Lily waiting near our table, concern evident in her expression as she saw my face. "What happened?" Later, I whispered as others approached. I pushed down the hurt plastered on a neutral expression and rejoined the dinner, but inside something had shifted. The last shreds of hope for family reconciliation had burned away, leaving something harder and more resolute in their place. The night before the wedding, I could not sleep. The conversation I had overheard played on repeat in my mind along with years of similar moments. Mother's dismissive comments, Brooke's competitive hostility, the constant message that I was somehow both too much and not enough. Lily found me at 3 a.m, sitting at the old piano in the living room, fingers hovering over the keys without playing afraid to wake the household. "You should leave," she said, simply sitting beside me on the bench. "We can be on the first train tomorrow. They do not deserve your music. They do not deserve you." Part of me wanted nothing more than to escape to protect myself from the public diminishment planned for the following day. But another part, perhaps the part still connected to my father's memory, resisted. "If I leave, they win," I said quietly. "They get to say I ran away again, that I failed to follow through, that I let everyone down." "Who cares what they say?" Lily challenged. "You have built a life they know nothing about. Your professors at Juilliard call you gifted. You have performed at Lincoln Center, for heaven's sake. Your composition was featured in that independent film last year. None of that disappears because your mother and sister refused to see it." She was right, of course. The validation I sought would never come from my family. But something beyond validation kept me rooted. Perhaps it was my father's voice in my memory, telling me that music was about truth, about expressing what words could not say. "I need to play tomorrow," I said finally. "Not for them, for me." Lily studied me for a long moment before nodding. "Then play Audrey, but play your truth, not their background noise." The morning of the wedding dawned bright and clear. The house buzzed with activity as hairstylists, makeup artists, and florists arrived. Brooke held court in the master bedroom, surrounded by bridesmaids who cast curious glances my way when I passed. I had not been asked to be part of the bridal party, another pointed exclusion. Mother found me in the kitchen, frowning at my simple black dress. "That is what you are wearing. It looks like funeral attire." "You said I should blend in," I reminded her. "Black is traditional for musicians at formal events." She pursed her lips. "Well, stay out of the way until it is time to leave. The photographer is coming for Brooke's getting ready photos, and we do not want to confuse things with extra people." Extra people, not family, not daughter, not sister, just an unnecessary addition. I spent the morning with Lily walking around my old neighborhood, showing her the park where I used to practice my music in my head when I could not be at the piano, the school where I had performed my first recital, the ice cream shop where Father would take me after particularly difficult lessons, a small act of rebellion against Mother's strict diet for me. By the time we arrived at the country club, I felt strangely calm, centered in a way I had not expected. The venue had been transformed into a lavish display of wealth and taste. White roses and orchids cascaded from every surface. Crystal chandeliers sparkled above tables set with fine china and silver. A string quartet played softly in the garden where the ceremony would take place. I made my way to the reception hall to familiarize myself with the piano, a beautiful Steinway that deserved better than the generic melodies I had been instructed to play. Nicole, the wedding planner, spotted me testing the keys. "Audrey Thompson," she said, approaching with a clipboard. "I thought your name sounded familiar yesterday. You won the Eastern Regional Young Artists Competition when you were, 14? I used to coordinate music events before switching to weddings." I nodded, surprised to be recognized. 15, actually." "You were extraordinary," she said. "I always wondered why you disappeared from the circuit. Everyone expected such a bright future." Before I could respond, Mother appeared, her expression tightening as she noticed our conversation. "Nicole, the florist, has questions about the head table arrangement," she interrupted. Turning to me, she added, "The guests will begin arriving in an hour. Make sure you are ready to play exactly what we discussed. Nothing experimental or modern, just simple, pleasant background music." As she led Nicole away, I heard her explaining Audrey had some issues with performance anxiety. Such a shame. But she is happy to help with simple reception music now. The dismissal was so practiced, so smoothly delivered, that Nicole nodded sympathetically, casting a pitying glance back at me. Another narrative in which I was the disappointing underachiever, the once promising talent who could not handle the pressure. As guests began to arrive for the ceremony, I positioned myself at the piano, invisible in my corner as instructed. I played the traditional processional pieces mechanically as the bridal party entered, then shifted to the wedding march as Brooke appeared on our uncle's arm, radiant in a designer gown that had been featured in a bridal magazine. Spread Mother had left conspicuously on the coffee table. During the ceremony, I watched my family from a distance. Mother dabbing at ceremonial tears, beaming with pride. Brooke gazing adoringly at James. The perfect family portrait, with no space for the black sheep daughter, relegated to providing musical accompaniment like hired help. After the ceremony, as guests moved to the reception hall for cocktails, I continued playing the approved selections, a bland soundtrack to the celebration unfolding around me. Occasionally, an older guest would glance my way with a flicker of recognition, whispering to their companion. I caught fragments of conversations. "Is that Elaine's younger daughter?" "Did not. She used to be some kind of prodigy. I heard she had some kind of breakdown." Mother circulated through the crowd, graciously accepting compliments on the beautiful wedding, introducing Brooke and James to important connections. When guests asked about me, I watched her perfect performance. "Yes, Audrey is providing our music today. She teaches now, nothing serious. We are just grateful she could help with Brooke's special day." The systematic diminishment continued through dinner. I was not given a place at the family table, but was expected to continue playing through the meal. A server brought a plate that I could barely touch. My stomach knotted with tension and hurt. Lily, seated at a table with distant relatives who hardly knew who she was, kept sending me encouraging glances. During a brief break while speeches were given, she managed to make her way to the piano. "You okay?" she whispered. "I will be," I said. And for the first time that day, I meant it. Because watching this elaborate performance of family happiness, I finally understood that I would never have a place in their narrative. And perhaps that was freedom rather than failure. As the formal dinner concluded and the dance portion of the evening began, Mother approached the piano, champagne glass in hand. "You can take a short break while they do the first dance," she informed me. "Then continue with the approved playlist. Remember, tasteful and subdued." She turned to leave, then added, almost as an afterthought, "Your playing has been adequate. I am sure no one has noticed any mistakes." It was such a small comment, but it was the final stone in a lifetime of diminishment. Something shifted inside me, a dam breaking after years of pressure. In that moment, I made a decision that would change everything. I watched from the sidelines as Brooke and James took to the dance floor for their first dance as husband and wife. The DJ had taken over for this portion, playing their chosen song, something romantic and current that Mother had likely deemed more appropriate than having me perform it. They moved gracefully, clearly, having taken dance lessons for the occasion. Guests circled the floor, smartphones raised to capture the moment, exclaiming over how perfect they looked together. As the song concluded, the father-daughter dance would traditionally follow. But with our father gone, Brooke had chosen to dance with our uncle instead. I felt a pang watching them, knowing Father would have been so proud to have that moment with either of his daughters. The thought of him strengthened my resolve for what I planned to do next. After the ceremonial dances concluded, guests began to mingle more freely. The DJ announced he would return later for the main dancing portion, and that gentle piano music would continue during dinner service. That was my cue. I returned to the piano in the corner, still partially hidden by the floral arrangement, and began playing the box selection Mother had specifically requested. For the first 15 minutes, I followed the approved playlist exactly. Gentle classical pieces that faded into the background of conversation, clinking glasses, and laughter. No one looked my way. No one noticed the music at all, which was precisely what Mother had wanted. I was providing a service, not sharing a gift. Across the room, I could see Mother holding court at the head table, gesturing animatedly as she spoke to James's parents. Brooke beside her, both of them glowing with satisfaction at the perfect event they had orchestrated. I thought of their laughter the night before, their pleasure at the thought of my public humiliation. My fingers continued moving automatically through a Chopin nocturne while my mind raced. I had spent years rebuilding my confidence, finding my voice through music, creating compositions that professors had called innovative and moving. Yet, here I sat playing the musical equivalent of wallpaper, because I had allowed myself to be defined by the people who had never truly seen me. Lily caught my eye from across the room, raising an eyebrow in silent question. I gave her a small nod and saw understanding dawn on her face, followed by a supportive smile. As the current piece concluded, instead of moving to the next approved selection, I paused. Just a moment of silence, a breath. Then I began to play one of my own compositions, a piece I had written during my final year at Juilliard titled Emergence. It began softly, tentatively, much like the background music I had been providing. But unlike those generic pieces, this one had a pulse, a heartbeat that gradually grew stronger. My fingers moved with confidence and emotion, building complex harmonies that spoke of struggle and resilience. The music rose and fell like breathing, each phrase connecting to the next with inevitable purpose. At first, no one seemed to notice the change. Conversations continued. Waitstaff moved between tables, the celebration proceeded. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, the atmosphere in the room began to shift. A few guests nearest to the piano paused their conversations, turning slightly toward the music. A waiter stopped momentarily, tray in hand, listening before continuing his work. I lost myself in the music and the story it told of pain, transformed into beauty of silence finding voice. This was the piece that had won me the composition award at Juilliard, the piece that my professor had urged me to submit to the prestigious Harrington Fellowship. Playing it here in this place where I had been most diminished felt like reclaiming something essential. As the composition built toward its emotional center, I glanced up to see that a small crowd had gathered near the piano. Among them was James Brooks' new husband, his expression one of genuine appreciation. More guests were turning in their seats, conversations dying down as the music commanded attention. I caught sight of Mother at the head table, her smile faltering as she noticed the shift in the room's energy. She stood clearly intending to intervene, but found her path blocked by guests who had moved closer to listen. Brooke beside her whispering something urgent, her perfect bridal expression slipping into one of annoyance. But I was beyond caring about their reactions now. The music had carried me to that transcendent space where nothing existed but the conversation between my heart, my hands, and the keys beneath them. I moved seamlessly from Emergence into another original composition, this one inspired by my father, infused with echoes of the jazz he had loved, and the classical traditions he had taught me to respect. The room had grown remarkably quiet now, the background music having become the focal point. I saw phones raised recording my performance, heard whispers of extraordinary and incredible talent from the growing audience around the piano. Someone had moved the floral arrangement that had partially obscured me, allowing guests a clear view of the performance unfolding in what had been intended as a forgotten corner. Among the watching guests, I spotted an older man leaning forward, intently studying my technique with professional interest. I recognized him vaguely as Thomas Blackwood, a music producer whose work I had studied at Juilliard. He had been mentioned in the wedding program as a friend of James's family. As I brought the piece to its conclusion, there was a moment of complete silence before applause erupted, startling in its enthusiasm. Guests who had been instructed to ignore the background pianist were now offering a standing ovation. I looked up to see genuine appreciation on dozens of faces, many of them the same people who had earlier accepted Mother's dismissive narrative about my musical career. Mother's face was a study in conflicting emotions, outward social graciousness battling with obvious fury. Brooke beside her, smile fixed, but eyes cold as she watched her carefully orchestrated wedding reception transform into an impromptu concert featuring the sister she had hoped to humiliate. James approached the piano, applauding with genuine enthusiasm. "That was incredible, Audrey. I had no idea you composed such beautiful music. Would you mind playing another piece?" Before I could respond, Mother appeared at his side, her hand gripping his arm with forced casualness. "James, darling, we should really proceed with the cake cutting. The schedule is quite tight." "Surely we can spare a few minutes," he replied, seemingly oblivious to the tension. "Your daughter is remarkably talented. Everyone is loving this." "Yes, well, Audrey was supposed to be playing the approved selections," she said, her voice lowered but audible to me. "This is Brooke's day, not a recital." But it was too late. Guests had gathered around the piano requesting more music, asking about my compositions, wondering aloud why they had been told I just taught beginners when clearly I was an accomplished musician. In that moment, I made another decision. This performance would not be about revenge or proving something to my mother and sister. It would be about honoring my father's memory and the gift he had nurtured in me. I would play not from hurt, but from love. I would be happy to play one more piece, I said, looking directly at James, but loud enough for nearby guests to hear. This was my father's favorite. I think he would have loved to hear it at his daughter's wedding. The mention of father created a respectful hush. Mother's expression flickered, knowing she could not object without appearing heartless. Brooke, who had joined them, looked momentarily uncertain, perhaps remembering the father who had loved both his daughters equally. I began to play a piece that father and I had often enjoyed together, my arrangement of Debussy's Clair de Lune that incorporated subtle jazz influences he had appreciated. The melody soared through the reception hall, achingly beautiful in its simplicity and depth. I poured into it all the love I still carried for my father, all the gratitude for his belief in me when no one else had seen my worth. When the final notes faded, there was not a dry eye in the vicinity of the piano. Even Brooke seemed affected, her perfect makeup slightly smudged as she dabbed at her eyes. Mother alone remained stone-faced, though I could see the tight grip with which she held her champagne glass. Thomas Blackwood approached as guests reluctantly began dispersing, urged by Nicole, the wedding planner, to proceed with the scheduled cake cutting. "That was extraordinary," he said without preamble. "You are Audrey Thompson. I feel I should know your work." "I recently completed my master's at Juilliard," I explained. "My focus is contemporary composition with classical influences." "Well, you have a remarkable gift," he said, handing me his card. "I am working on a project that might interest you. A collection of new works by emerging composers. I would love to hear more of your music." As he walked away, I caught Mother watching the exchange, her expression unreadable. The power dynamic had shifted irrevocably. The background music had refused to stay in the background, and the daughter she had dismissed had been recognized for exactly the talent she had tried to minimize. The remainder of the reception unfolded in a way no one had anticipated. After the cake-cutting ceremony, guests began approaching me whenever I took a break from playing, asking about my music, requesting specific pieces, treating me not as hired entertainment but as a featured performer worthy of attention and respect. Nicole, the wedding planner, who had earlier delivered Mother's instructions about subdued ambient music, now hovered nearby with an entirely different demeanor. "The guests are absolutely loving your performance," she said. "Would you be willing to play during the bouquet toss? Perhaps something upbeat and original?" Mother intercepted before I could answer. "Nicole, we discussed the schedule in detail. The DJ will handle the rest of the evening's entertainment as planned." But Nicole stood her ground, something I suspected rarely happened with my mother. Several guests specifically requested more piano music, Mrs. Thompson, including the father of the groom. It would be a shame to disappoint them. Mother's smile remained fixed, but her eyes flashed with anger. "Very well, one more piece during the bouquet toss. Then we proceed as planned." As she walked away, Nicole lowered her voice. "I remember your performances from the Young Artists Circuit. You were extraordinary then, and you are even better now. Do not let anyone dim your light." The unexpected support from a virtual stranger nearly brought tears to my eyes. I nodded gratefully, unable to speak past the emotion in my throat. When the time came for the bouquet toss, I played an original composition that pulsed with joy and possibility, its rhythm perfect for the celebratory moment. Guests turned to watch both Brooke preparing to toss her bouquet and me creating the soundtrack for the moment. The division of attention was subtle but unmistakable. I caught Brooke glancing my way, her expression complex. Annoyance certainly at having to share the spotlight on her wedding day, but something else too. Perhaps a grudging respect or the faintest recognition of the sister she had competed with rather than supported. After the bouquet toss, despite Mother's instructions, guests continued to request music from me. James's father approached the piano, introducing himself warmly. "My son tells me you studied at Juilliard," he said. "We are great supporters of the arts. James's grandmother was a concert pianist in her day. She would have loved your playing." "Thank you," I replied, genuinely touched by his kindness. "Will you play something else for us? Perhaps during dinner the DJ is fine, but live music of your caliber is a rare treat." It was a direct contradiction to Mother's plans, but delivered with such genuine appreciation that I found myself agreeing. More than that, I felt a confidence I had not expected to find in this place among these people who had known me only through my family's dismissive lens. As I continued playing, weaving between classical favorites and my own compositions, I noticed phones recording my performance guests, exchanging information discussing my music with genuine interest. What had been planned as a background role had transformed into something like a debut. Thomas Blackwood returned during another break, this time with a colleague in tow. "This is Sophia Williams, a director I work with frequently. I was telling her about your compositions. She is always looking for original music for her films." Sophia shook my hand warmly. "Your piece about Emergence was captivating. I would love to hear more of your work. Are you represented by anyone?" The conversation continued, delving into possible collaboration, exchanging contact information, making tentative plans to meet in New York. All while Mother watched from across the room, her perfect wedding plan veering wildly off course, as her supposedly failed daughter received the professional recognition she had worked so hard to prevent. Brooke approached during a quiet moment, her bridal smile firmly in place, though her eyes remained cool. "Everyone is talking about your playing," she said, her tone making it unclear whether this was a compliment or an accusation. "I hope it is adding to your special day," I replied neutrally. "James is certainly impressed. He keeps telling people his new sister-in-law is a musical genius." She laughed lightly, but I caught the edge beneath it. "Funny how you never played like that at home." "I never had the chance," I said simply, "but I am glad I could contribute to your wedding." She studied me for a moment, something shifting in her expression. "Dad would have loved it," she admitted finally. "He always said you had something special." With that, she turned and rejoined her husband, leaving me to absorb the first genuine acknowledgement she had offered in years. As the evening progressed, I found myself surrounded by a small but growing network of interested professionals and appreciative listeners. A local music teacher asked if I would consider giving a master class during my stay in town. A retired conductor discussed nuances in my interpretation of Debussy. Parents inquired if I offered advanced lessons remotely. The narrative was rewriting itself in real time. No longer the failed prodigy or the struggling teacher of beginners, I was being seen as the accomplished musician I had worked to become. The very wedding that had been designed to showcase my inadequacy had instead become a platform for my talent. Mother made one final attempt to reassert control as the evening wound down. Approaching the piano during a break, she spoke quietly but intensely. "You have made quite a spectacle of yourself," she said, her smile in place, for any watching guests. "This was supposed to be Brooke's day, your sister's celebration, yet somehow you have managed to make it about you, as always." The accusation was so backward, so contrary to the reality of our family dynamic, that I almost laughed. But looking at her rigid posture, the genuine distress beneath her anger, I felt a surprising flicker of compassion. "I played my music, Mother," I said gently. "That is all. If people appreciated it, that is their choice. It takes nothing away from Brooke's beautiful wedding." "You were supposed to be background," she insisted, voice tight. "Unobtrusive. Appropriate." In that moment, I understood something fundamental about my mother that had eluded me for years. Her need to diminish me had never been about my failures. It had been about her own fears, her own unfulfilled dreams, her terror that her daughter might succeed where she had not. "I am sorry that my music makes you uncomfortable," I said honestly. "But I am not sorry for playing it." She stared at me for a long moment, something complicated passing across her face. Without another word, she turned and walked away, rejoining the mother of the groom at a nearby table, her social mask sliding perfectly back into place. As the reception began winding down, James approached once more, this time without Mother's intercepting presence. "Audrey, your music absolutely made this wedding unforgettable. Brooke never mentioned how talented you are." "Thank you," I said simply. "That means a lot." "I hope this means we will see more of you," he continued. "Family is important to me, and I would love to get to know my new sister-in-law better. Perhaps you could play at our home sometime when you visit." The genuine warmth in his invitation highlighted the artifice of my family's treatment. This stranger saw value in me that my own mother and sister had denied for years. It was both heartbreaking and liberating. "I would like that," I replied, realizing I meant it. As guests began departing, many stopped to thank me personally for the music, several requesting my contact information for future events or collaborations. Lily appeared at my side, beaming with pride. So much for background music, she said quietly. You just gave a career-defining performance at your sister's wedding. That has to be some kind of poetic justice. Looking around at the dispersing crowd at Brooke and James, thanking guests by the door, at Mother maintaining her perfect hostess smile despite the unplanned direction of the evening, I shook my head. This was never about justice, I realized. It was about finding my voice again in the very place where it was first silenced. The morning after the wedding, Lily and I prepared to leave early, planning to catch the first train back to New York. I had packed my few belongings ready to slip away without prolonged goodbyes when a knock came at the bedroom door. To my surprise, it was Brooke still in pajamas, her wedding makeup removed, looking younger and more vulnerable than she had in years. "Can we talk?" she asked quietly, glancing at Lily. "I will grab us some coffee," Lily said, tactfully squeezing my shoulder as she left us alone. An awkward silence settled between us, sisters who had once shared a childhood but had become strangers separated by years of competition and resentment. "Your music yesterday," Brooke finally began, sitting gingerly on the edge of the bed. "It was beautiful, really beautiful." "Thank you," I said, unsure where this conversation was headed. She twisted her new wedding ring nervously. "I always hated piano lessons, you know. Mother pushed me into them because that is what Thompson girls did, but I had no talent for it. And then you came along and it was just effortless for you." "It was never effortless," I corrected gently. "I practiced constantly. You just did not see that part." "Maybe," she sighed. "But you had something I did not. A gift. And instead of being proud of my little sister, I resented you for it. That is not easy to admit, but it is true." The honesty was unexpected, disarming. "I resented you too," I admitted. "For being the daughter Mother could love without conditions. For fitting into her vision in ways I never could." Brooke looked surprised. "You think Mother loves me unconditionally?" "Everything has always been a transaction with her. My grades, my appearance, my career, my choice of husband. Everything measured against her standards. The recognition of our shared experience despite our different positions in Mother's hierarchy created a moment of genuine connection. I should not have let her position you as background music at my wedding," Brooke continued. "That was cruel, and I knew it. Part of me wanted to see you diminished because I spent so many years feeling invisible beside you. But when you played your own music yesterday—" She paused, seeming to search for words. "I felt proud of you, and ashamed of myself. Both at once." The admission hung between us, imperfect but honest. Not a full reconciliation, but perhaps the beginning of something healthier than what we had before. "I do not expect us to suddenly become best friends," she said, standing to leave. "Too much has happened. But maybe we could try being actual sisters again someday, without the competition." "I would like that," I said, meaning it despite the caution I still felt. She nodded, hesitated as if wanting to say more, then simply said, "Safe travels back to New York," and left the room. Downstairs, I found Thomas Blackwood speaking with Lily in the kitchen. He smiled warmly when he saw me. "Audrey, I was hoping to catch you before you left. I was serious about my interest in your work. I have a recording session booked next month for the Emerging Composers project I mentioned. I would like to include 2 of your pieces if you are interested." The professional opportunity was significant, something many of my classmates would envy. But more meaningful was the validation from someone who had no agenda, who had responded purely to the quality of my music. "I would be honored," I said, accepting his card with more specific details. As we finalized arrangements, Mother appeared in the doorway, taking in the scene with obvious displeasure. "Mr. Blackwood, I did not realize you were still here," she said, her hostess smile firmly in place. "Can I offer you some breakfast?" "Thank you, no. I was just discussing a professional opportunity with your daughter. She has remarkable talent." Mother's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Yes, Audrey has always been musical. A family trait, really. I taught piano for many years myself." The attempt to claim credit for my ability was so characteristic that I almost laughed. Some patterns would never change. After Thomas left with promises to be in touch, Mother turned to me, her expression unreadable. "So, you made quite an impression yesterday." "It was a beautiful wedding," I replied neutrally. Brooke looked happy. Several guests commented on your playing, she continued, as if I had not spoken. Mrs. Sullivan asked why we had hired such an accomplished pianist instead of using the country club's regular musician. The implication was clear. My performance had raised questions about why my own family had presented me as something less than I was. What did you tell her? I asked, genuinely curious how she had navigated this challenge to her narrative. I said you had recently found your way back to music after some time away, she answered carefully. That we were all very proud of your accomplishments. The revision of history was breathtaking in its audacity, yet instead of anger I felt a strange sadness for this woman who could not acknowledge reality even when confronted with it directly. We are leaving soon, I said simply. Thank you for having us. She nodded stiffly, then hesitated. For a moment, I thought she might actually express something genuine. Instead, she said, your playing was always technically proficient. Your father encouraged too much emotionality, I thought. But the guests seemed to respond to it. It was as close to a compliment as she could manage, wrapped in criticism and qualified with reference to others' opinions rather than her own. I recognized it for what it was, the most she could offer without dismantling the worldview that protected her from her own failures. Dad always said music without emotion is just noise, I replied quietly. I think he was right. Something flickered across her face at the mention of my father. Pain, perhaps, or regret, but it vanished quickly behind her practiced mask. Safe travels, she said formally and turned to leave. Mother, I called after her. She paused but did not turn around. I do not need your approval anymore. I just thought you should know that. Her shoulders stiffened, but she said nothing as she walked away. Lily returned, having tactfully given us space for this final interaction. Everything okay? She asked, concern evident in her voice. Yes, I said, surprised to realize I meant it. Better than okay, actually. We left the house quietly, our departure unmarked by emotional goodbyes. As the taxi pulled away, I looked back at the home where I had grown up, feeling not the pain I had expected, but a curious lightness. The power that place and those people had held over me had diminished, not because they had changed, but because I finally saw them clearly. In the 6 months that followed, my life transformed in ways I could not have anticipated. Thomas Blackwood not only included 2 of my compositions in his Emerging Artists collection, but introduced me to industry connections that led to scoring opportunities for independent films. I began performing my own work at intimate venues around New York, building a small but dedicated following. My relationship with Brooke evolved cautiously through occasional text messages and one brief coffee meeting when she visited New York for business. Not close, but civil, with moments of genuine connection emerging from the wreckage of our past competition. She shared photos of her new home, asked appropriate questions about my career, and seemed genuinely pleased when I mentioned my growing success. Mother remained unchanged, her rare communications still filled with subtle diminishments and revisionist history. After several anxiety-inducing phone calls, I made the difficult decision to limit contact to holiday greetings and essential family information. It was not estrangement exactly, but a boundary that protected the confidence I had worked so hard to rebuild. The deepest lesson from that wedding day unfolded gradually in the months that followed. I realized that talent cannot be diminished by others' attempts to minimize it. That the voice inside us, if nurtured and protected, will eventually find its way out into the world. That sometimes our greatest performances come not from perfect conditions, but from the very places where we have been most wounded. My father had tried to teach me this when I was young. Music is truth, Audrey, he would say, and truth, if it is genuine, will always find its audience. On my 29th birthday, I gave my first major solo performance at a respected New York venue. The program included several original compositions alongside classical pieces that had shaped my musical development. As I walked onto the stage to genuine applause, I thought of how far I had come from that corner piano at Brooke's wedding, from the frightened 12-year-old who froze during her showcase, from the daughter who was never quite enough. I thought too of my father, who had seen my gift and protected it when no one else did, who had taught me that music was not about perfection but about honest expression. I dedicated the performance to him, this man who had given me the greatest gift, the belief that my voice mattered. The lesson I carry forward is not about vengeance or vindication, though there was satisfaction in proving my worth to those who had dismissed it. Rather, it is about the power of reclaiming your narrative, of refusing to be background music in your own life story, of finding the courage to play your truth loudly and beautifully, even when others would prefer you remain silent. I have learned that healing does not require others to acknowledge the wounds they inflicted. That forgiveness is not about excusing past hurts, but about freeing yourself from their continued power over you. That sometimes the family we build from friendship and shared passion nurtures us more completely than the one we were born into. And perhaps most importantly, I have learned that our most painful experiences often become the source of our most authentic art, if we have the courage to transform them rather than be defined by them. So if you are watching this and feel diminished by those who should support you, if your gifts are dismissed or your voice silenced, remember, true talent cannot be contained forever. Your song will find its way out. And when it does, even those who tried to silence you will have no choice but to listen. Have you ever been made to feel small for something you were actually good at? How did you reclaim your power and find your voice again? Let me know in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear it today. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember that your story matters too, no matter who tries to minimize it.